Hi everyone, welcome to the first live streamed event for South Asian Heritage Month. I'm Jasveer Singh. I am one of the co-founders of South Asian Heritage Month. The month runs from the 18th of July to the 17th of August. It's a celebration of South Asian identity. It's commemoration of important parts of history and important dates. And it's also about education. It's about educating ourselves about what it means to be South Asian in Britain today. We've had an amazing start today. It's been blazingly hot outside, so I'm sure you've been enjoying the sunshine, or at least I hope you've had a chance to. But I am very glad to welcome you all to today's event, which is Brick Lane Past and Future. It's part of the Bangladesh 50 events that are being organised for this year's South Asian Heritage Month. I am very glad to be joined by a number of different people, and I will hand over now to our chair for the day, for the evening, who is Poppy Juman. Poppy is a British Bengali mental health campaigner who has led 2 social enterprises in England, which are Mental Health First Aid England and now City Mental Health Alliance. She served 2 terms on the board of Public Health England and has set up mental health projects across the world, including in Bangladesh, India, and Uganda. And she's the founder of Rebalance, which earlier this year launched as Ki Khobor, or What News, to, as Poppy herself says, shamelessly celebrate British Bengali identity. Poppy, over to you.
Thanks, Jasveer. And just as we kick off, I'm chuffed to bits to be part of the South Asian Heritage Month education and celebration specifically. And over the last 24 hours, I've done enormous research into both Saif and Raju. And I have to say, I'm just overwhelmed by the amount of work and their insights into British Bengali heritage, culture, and their very specific lens. So I'm just honored to be interviewing both of them today. We've got about an hour together, and what I'm going to do is in a moment set a little bit of context from my perspective. But before I do that, I'm going to introduce both Raju and Saif. Then Raju's going to say a few words, 10 minutes to give us his perspective, then Saif, and then I'm going to invite you all to ask as many questions as you would like to actually uncover more of why they are both campaigning to recognize Brick Lane for what it is and how that fits into preserving, I guess, the bits of our heritage and culture that we want to preserve and what that means from the context of belonging. So first of all, many of the listeners and participants today will be familiar with Raju Vaidyanathan. He has lived in Brick Lane all of his life. Let me just read his profile. When I spoke to him yesterday, he very humbly said he's a librarian, but actually when you look at the work that he has done, it is just so inspirational. And I've seeing the images and pictures that he took, it's been a real nostalgic trip down memory lane and childhood for me. In 1983, he acquired an old second-hand camera and started taking photos. He took thousands of photographs of his neighborhood, but could never afford to develop his negatives into prints until he enrolled in a photography course in 2015. And finally, he and the world saw his work for the first time in nearly 30 years. His photos provide an insider's view of community life in Brick Lane in the 1980s, captured by an Asian teenage lens. So Raju, welcome. And in a moment, I'm going to kick off with you. Saif Osmani is an artist operating within architecture. His practice inquires into social cultural ruptures resulting from changing the built environment. Born in London, he is a Sylheti Bangladeshi origin and has a studio located in East London. He is also active in the campaign to prevent Brick Lane from losing its identity through regeneration and has been on the Brick Lane demonstrations this afternoon. When I spoke to Saif on Friday, he was making the placards. So both of these men are inspiring members of our community, and they've both been out on the demonstration today. So welcome, gentlemen. And Raju, let me kick off with you. I've got 3 parts to a very big question. What is Banglatown? Which Brick Lane is obviously associated is, that's what I think of. What are you campaigning to preserve, and what does it mean to you personally?
As far as I can make out from my memories, when the Labour Party in Tower Hamlets changed in the early 80s, the new Labour Party came in the mid 80s, and one of the proposals that they did say was that they wanted to have Brick Lane as Banglatown, following Chinatown. So they said there's a Chinatown, so we want, you can't see no reason why there can't be a Banglatown. So at that time, there wasn't that many restaurants, 85, 86 is when the restaurant boom really started. So, so that's, it was, it was a political decision at the time. And I think in 88 or 89 there was the Bethnal Green City Challenge, and that all came into the whole issue of making Brick Lane a bit more accessible to a newer generation of people coming in for curry houses and everything. And that's when the name Banglatown actually came in. And then later on in the late 90s, early 2000s, and the boundary changes, they changed the name of Spitalfields into Spitalfields and Banglatown. So Banglatown, is the identity, and is leaving an imprint at the time, until the early 80s, you would say that, it was still fairly mixed in the Asian sense. The white and black community were, what you'd call the white flight, black flight, whatever you want to call, and things were changing. So so the sort of the space was there to call it Brick Lane, that area of Banglatown. So to me, Banglatown, that's what it means, I've still got the newspaper cuttings if I look for it, it's not just photos, it's the leaflets and the posters and the magazines and the newspaper cuttings, I've just picked up a handful of newspaper, this is all from 1989. I haven't got a clue, some of these things. This says 16th of March 1990, and it's about March in Brick Lane, so, I haven't got a clue what I've got, but I do remember that there was the Labour Party decided that there has to be a name change.
And Raju, what is it that is you, when we spoke yesterday, I asked you, what is it that you want to keep? What is it from the essence of Banglatown or Brick Lane that you want to keep moving forward, given how much change is occurring at the moment?
If you ask Asian people like me who've grown up in the area, the last two things of preserve, for us was Taj Stores and Sweet and Spicy restaurant, So we've already lost Sweet and Spice, I know there's a very famous Bangladeshi guy living in Singapore, he came to Brick Lane, and the first thing he did walking down home was he rang me from outside Sweet and Spicy. He said, "Hey, it's gone." And I said, "Yeah, it's gone, don't. So, it was for us, the people who were born in Brick Lane, who've grown up, Sweet and Spicy and Taj Stores were the two identities, The restaurants came later. Yeah, fair enough. Clifton Restaurant, that was an identity, when the chef died, I arranged the funeral of the chef in Clifton Restaurant, my father was actually asked to work there first in the 60s, but he said no, So to me, I'm being honest about it. Already the identity is more or less gone, I think there's 8 restaurants on this side and another 4 on the other side, those kind of things have all gone, what is left, I think, is the buildings that I think has to be kept, I don't want the buildings to be changed. I remember when the Truman Brewery was actually renovated, I think it was in the mid-70s, you know. I remember looking at it thinking, oh, they're building a glass building, you know, before it wasn't glass, you know. So I remember all these little things, you know, and I remember all the reconstruction, all the old buildings, all the buildings being knocked down. It was our playground, you know, all these things. I remember, I mean, you know, in my lifetime, I remember bombed out sites, you know, and because we were heavily bombed in this side, you know, the Bishop Guja was here, you know, and they just followed, you know, that's it. We need to bomb all the railway tracks. So this part of London was heavily bombed, you know. So you know, so there was a lot of reconstruction, you know. So I remember all these things, you know, and look, you know, thank God most of the old buildings have been knocked down and rebuilt in the 70s and 80s. And same with Florendine Estate, you know. I know people who were born in the Florendine Estate, you know, just at the end of Brick Lane, you know. I've actually got an aerial photo that I took. I climbed over to the top of Pauline House and the other house in Commercial Street. And I mean, even though I had a very bad camera, I actually took an aerial photo of the construction of Florendine Estate, you know, and all these things, you know. I mean, but it's just, you know, you're talking about nostalgia versus reality, you know, and, you know, it merges into, you know, realistic, you know, things, you know. I mean, I'm feeling nostalgic for Sweet and Spicy, that all of us, you know, whenever we meet up, oh, it's, you know, if only Sweet and Spicy was there, we could have gone and had a curry and rice, you know, but it's gone, you know, it's gone.
And from what you're saying, Raju, I'm hearing both hope and loss. So let me, and you've talked about buildings and structure and architecture, and that's what our second guest, Saif, you know, really is, all of his work has been dedicated to that. Saif, can I bring you in as well and ask you to speak through your lens to those two, you know, questions, and maybe even reflect on what some of Raju said. So what is Banglatown? What does campaigning for preserving, what are you campaigning to preserve? And what does it mean to you personally? Your reflections on that, those questions.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you very much. Me. We've just come back from a demo, actually, where I saw Raju taking photographs. So the demo just ended, and it was, you know, walking all the way down Brick Lane and walking the path of ancestors, really. You know, we've had generations of demonstrations on Brick Lane. It's always been a place of expression, and now it's probably cultural expression. Before it's probably political, and now it's become political again, you know. And I think what's great about the demonstration today that we had, which was a Save Brick Lane and Battle for Brick Lane demonstration, is that a new generation of people are saying Brick Lane's very important to us. It's not just a case of ethnic minorities moving out. We're very much here. We're here to stay. When we do the objection letters and the petitions locally, we find that people in their 20s and 30s are still living in those estates off of Brick Lane. They're very much here, but the difference here in this generation is that they no longer have access to Brick Lane. And that's a reality that we're seeing across London and across maybe other parts of England, where ethnic majority areas, as I call them, are very much under threat. So in East London, for example, here you'll find that Brick Lane's under threat. There's Brixton, where the Afro-Caribbean community feel under threat. The South American Council sisters. And why is that going on? You know, there's huge policy changes that are happening that really, really impact our communities, and especially these ethnic enclaves. And like Raju said rightfully, the idea of a Banglatown was actually quite imaginary if you look at it. I mean, it's the first time in the West somebody had turned around and said, we're going to acknowledge a South Asian group in a very distinct way. And I think, and we're going to enshrine it through the street signs as well around here, still written in Bengali, you know, and it's a very charming element to it. But what we're finding is that they're not being renovated. In fact, you'll see that they're rusting away in front of us, because there's something being said there, is that it's about time the Bengalis moved out. But the truth is they haven't. They're still here. It's a different generation. They're asking for different things, you know. And the diversity of restaurants. You're right, Raju. You're completely right. I mean, at one point where there was nothing going on post-war. They were going to bulldoze parts of the East End. The diversity of restaurants there was predominantly, I would call, maybe colonial curries, where you sit down and have different curry experiences, from Dan Sachs to kormas, and they're still there and they're pretty good. But right now we're seeing Sylheti home food as well, which is a phenomenon that started maybe in the last 10 years, maybe even 5 to 10 years. And they're available now. So people are cooking what they cook at home. There's also Dhaka style biryanis at the top end, which people don't know about. And they're adding something very different as well. So I think there is a diversity of offer. It's shifted. Maybe it's shifted off Brick Lane, and maybe that's changing. Everybody always talks about, for example, the curry houses closing, but the truth is, other places closed. Nobody ever spoke about the cereal cafe. The famous cereal cafe that was a sign of the height of hipster culture, had closed during COVID. But the great thing is, a lot of the curry restaurants have survived and still here. And I think that's something really to be celebrated. And especially when you look at this area, it's not just about the curry houses. Actually, it's more than that. I went to art school, and when I was doing end of year shows, for example, we'd show those exhibitions off of Brick Lane, and they were in ad hoc places, rundown buildings, a little bit like the one I'm in at the moment, which is first built in 1705, and by the Huguenots, and people would be making things in these houses. They were working people's homes. They're not the rich, over curated place that we see nowadays when we walk down these roads. They were very much used as everyday places. And the place where I'm showing this exhibition, called Framing Banglatown, sorry, is on Princelet Street, which right in the middle of Brick Lane, off of Brick Lane, and you don't get access to these buildings very often. And so we're lucky that the organisation that's overlooking it, a foundation in Switzerland and Assemble Studio, have allowed the community access to some of the old historic building. And it's you're asking why this area is important to me. I think it's part of the evolution, for diasporic roots, for ethnic minorities like the Bangladeshi community. We experienced Bangladesh through Brick Lane. We really, really did. When you really take it apart, like Poppy and me spoke earlier in the week, and we were saying, Poppy was saying, well, there's a few places where you can just dive in and feel for a second or a moment or maybe for even an hour that you were in someplace different, and you reconnected with that. And I think that's very much alive. It's a heritage that's alive, and it's a heritage that isn't stuck in archives in black and white photographs, which are, crumbling away about pre-Victorian ages. We're the generation, and we are the communities that have come post-war. That we're part of a different historic trajectory, and Brick Lane very much embodies that for me. And I was born off of Brick Lane, so some of my earliest memories have really changed, and very much associated with Spitalfields Market, and how I used to get fresh vegetables there. And right now, even the markets at the northern end of Brick Lane are suddenly seen as undesirable, but they're actually the foundation of what the East End is. That's where Barrow Boys and the old East End come and exchange their vocal languages, and you could hear all of this kind of concussion of culture. And I think that's exactly what's important about this. So when developments like the one that's being proposed for the Truman Brewery come up, we have to really ask ourselves some really core things about what it is we value. It's not just the financial valuing of capital, the creative capital, the social capital, and people really make that. I take students from around the world, university students. I take them to Brick Lane because I want them to talk about, and they do. They're more likely to talk about this than any other place. And it's exciting. It's exciting, and I really think it's under threat, unfortunately, just because of the way the policies work. And we've got some very old planning policies. We've got Victorian style planning policies which aren't adjusting to an international world city we're in, and our approach to local needs to be really seriously reconsidered if we're going to keep these great things that we can jump up about and say to the world, look, we do the diversity better, or we do South Asian culture better, because Brick Lane was about that. It was an expression of South Asian culture and imagination. It's a great place for imagination.
So one of the things that you've said a few times is policy, and actually some policy decisions have led to where we're at now, where we're seeing a dismantling of a identity and a culture, and also therefore belonging through this street that is infamous in the Bengali community. What policy frameworks or what principles need to be at policy level in order to make sure that the trickle effect 5 decisions on isn't what you're experiencing now, isn't lost? I mean, I'm sure you've had lots of discussions around that. What would you say to that?
Well, a lot of it's kind of embodied in how we view local and also how we view South Asians. And unfortunately, the policy views still view them in slightly colonized mindsets, that South Asians like to operate in a particular way, or South Asian women are quiet and they don't go into public spaces, or if they do, they're hidden somewhere. Of course they're not. My parents live off of Green Street, and you're very aware that none of those policies that are coming up or the engagement doesn't acknowledge that South Asian women are there. In fact, they're just seen as shoppers, but they're walking through those spaces and living those spaces. And similarly with Brick Lane, you'll see a different kind of South Asian woman there as well. And what you find at the southern end, there is encounter there. They come shopping there for families, often just because you see an older South Asian person. It doesn't mean that they themselves are just shopping for themselves. They're often shopping for 3 or 4 generations of a family, and there's a great culture of food there. The food culture is very much alive. It's not, and every family will be different. And on the northern end, for example, you see of Brick Lane, on the northern end, you'll see that actually South Asian women are probably less likely to go there, or they've said to me actually as well from our conversations that they're less likely to go there, and that is worrying. It's worrying because often, we talk about that access to women into these spaces, because often women are cultural holders. They pass down. I mean, a lot of my encounters with culture has been because my mother has passed them down, or my grandmother has. Whereas my dad, it's more about books and brains, so it's a different thing. Whereas it's a very different kind of and very important one, especially, as an artist, it becomes very important. So, and policy doesn't understand that. I try to do a lot of policy change for the London Plan, which is a document that overlooks a lot of the developments across the capital. And we try and change things, and we barely sometimes can change a sentence, to acknowledge that, for example, this center in this ethnic majority area is important, and you can't change that. And that's really saddening that local authorities as well don't often acknowledge that in a very meaningful way and understand that. So you're constantly having to be an activist in a way, and I do that through my artwork. The photographic exhibition I have at the moment is looking at the intersection between the hipster culture, the Bangladeshi areas of this area, and heritage policies, and how they intersect, and how one is actually pushing the other, and the ethnic minority areas inevitably do get pushed, because they don't have so much leverage when you look at the entire planning system's financialization.
Yeah, and we're not represented in across the decision making hierarchies, and I think that is to a block, because if you're not there, if the voice isn't often there, then actually who's to? So it's also ignorance as much as limited curiosity, I would say. So actually, when you're sitting in decision-making boards or groups, when you're curious about what is going to make something work, and actually not driven just by profit and the economics of a business or a community, actually you make different discussion, different choices and different decisions, I think, as well. And Raju, I am going to bring you back in on the gender perspective and women's spaces. I'm going to let you think about that for a moment. But the question is, in your photographs of, there wasn't actually that many photographs of women. And I'm curious as to your perspective on Brick Lane, Banglatown, and women's spaces through that. Saif has made some really powerful statements around actually who were the culture creators in his life, that mothers, grandmothers. But when you actually visually look at Brick Lane, does that represent that? So I'm going to come to you on that in a moment. But I just wanted to comment by saying I'm not from Brick Lane. I grew up in Portsmouth, which, the very stereotypical story. Granddad worked in the Merchant Navy for 25 years. Dad then came over at the age of 12. We settled, and then Dad went back, got married to Mum. Mum came over. I was born in Bangladesh, Moli Bazar. Then came over about 18 months, and we grew up in Portsmouth. And actually in Portsmouth, we weren't the majority minorities. We were like, really, there was like 4 families in the early days, and it was in the top 10 racist cities in the UK. So growing up in the 80s was pretty phenomenal. And then as a Bengali girl, there was the cultural elements around, Mum and Dad wanting to preserve their culture, so bringing me up very much as they were brought up, but they were children when they left their home countries, so they were bringing me up through that lens. And then at school and in education and in the mainstream, there was a constant message that you don't really belong here, and actually what you're doing here. So I found women and, well, kids of my generation, I'm in my 40s, really struggling with their identity when they sat outside of Brick Lane. But we had the British Bengali imagination. I think it was captured by Brick Lane. So even though I didn't know, I didn't grow up in Brick Lane, I knew of this place called Brick Lane, and Dad would go up, or there would be a wedding, or there'd be a trip to Khala's house in Wood Green, and then we'd always take a trip to Brick Lane to pick up the mishti, pick up the zilabi. And I remember every time we drove into Brick Lane, it was like another world. It was like everybody looked like me, and I felt like, and the smells and the language, and it was amazing. And it was a bit scary because I'd never met so many Bengali people all at the same time together. It was just like, now most of my work is in the City of London, and I will very often at the end of a day when I'm feeling exhausted or I'm feeling othered, actually my fix is to go to Brick Lane, go to one of the cafes that serve proper Bengali food, hukti satni, dal, alu porta, sit and eat with my fingers and just enjoy the vibe. And often I'm the only Bengali woman there, like on my own. And I guess I'm comfortable with that. So I'll eat and actually because and then I'll leave. And that to me is a real fix, because for an hour, for 3 hours, I've just immersed myself in people that look like me. And that is really good for my mental health. It really keeps me grounded. So I really love the fact that we've got a place called Banglatown, and I imagine loads of people like me do a very similar thing. We go for our fix to belong. So I just wanted to share that with you as part of my story, and why I was so fascinated to facilitate this discussion as an outsider. Is it means something to me to preserve the essence of Banglatown, not necessarily through the restaurants and modern sari is gone, for example, but that was the early sari shops that we used to go to. But I remember all of that. But so Raju, to you, women and gender specific spaces, and your photographs don't capture that many women. What was that about?
Well, obviously, let me just say 2 things. There are lots of photos of women, yeah. It's just that wasn't published, yeah. I've done quite a few pop-up exhibitions, and one of the exhibitions was Women of the 80s, Asian Women of the 80s from Brick Lane. Yeah, I've actually got a file on my laptop now that I can show you all the photos that you need of women, yeah. But obviously, the situation was different in those days, yeah. The men were separate from women, the men, even now, you go to the coffee house. I took a picture last week of the football. I've been taking photos. I've been photographing the pandemics, and I've been photographing the football as well last week, and it's quite interesting that all the men, Asian, South Asian men, Bengali men were in specific restaurants, or bars, in Shoreditch, other than the bars in Shoreditch or, there was one place I kept on going to, well, 2 places and the final. But it was funny that the Bengali women, young Bengali women, were in their specific pubs, they kept away from the men. They kept with them, probably their work colleagues, in pubs, maybe they're not, it's not up to me to work out. But I didn't watch the final. I haven't watched any matches, you know. I decided I will photograph the whole tournament, people watching it, you know, just like the pandemic. I mean, the spaces in them in the 70s and 80s, as you say, was different in Brick Lane. But now there are changes now. Yeah, you go to Bethnal Green and you go to Whitechapel, the majority of the South Asian shoppers are women. You hardly find any men. Yeah, you hardly find any men. You go to the cafes of Whitechapel, half the waiters are women. Yeah, I went to a restaurant last week. All the waiters except for 2 were women. Yeah, so it is changing. You go to the dark kitchens, you know, there's so many. There's 4 dark kitchens in Brick Lane alone. Yeah, all the workers are women. The one in Poplar is all women. The one in it's all women. So it is changing. But in Brick Lane itself, if you go where all the you know, there's the northern end where all the vintage shops are and everything. Yeah, that end, you're now beginning to see, you know, a lot of Asian women, South Asian women. Yeah, you are seeing Bengali girls coming down. You are seeing Indian girls coming down. You are seeing that. I mean, we actually had a discussion about this 2 weeks ago and last week. I worked until about 10 years ago. I was working as a youth worker all these years, so I had connections with young people, you know. So nowadays, you know, I'm working because I do a lot of work. Alta Valley Foundation. I don't know if you know about it. So I was one of the founders of it. Yeah. So I do a lot of work with young people about Alta Valley, and also talking about Brick Lane. You know, maybe the magic about Brick Lane for people like me is different from the young people now. Yeah, they probably don't understand the experience of Brick Lane as it is. You know, even they tell me you should be going to Green Street, you shouldn't be going down, you know. But you are seeing young Bengali girls going into the vintage shops. You are seeing young Bengali girls and Indian girls going and eating. You know, I had the shock of my life when I saw, you know, young Asian people eating. You know, I thought it was me and my neighbor, you know, eating these food from around the world, you know. And so, I mean, there is a slow change, you know. You see, I don't know, we call it the Camden Town effect, you know. In the 80s, you know, a lot of us in Brick Lane, we wanted to go to Camden Town because that was the hip place to go to, you know.
Yeah.
We used to go to Camden Town all the time. God knows why. We never bought anything, but we always used to go because we thought, oh, this is a hip place to be. And, you know, we ended up, you know, having a stall there. But for a short time, we never sold a single thing in about 6 weeks. So we gave up. But now I'm seeing the same thing, you know. I mean, Camden Town is now just gone down the drain. It's just for tourists, you know. But I think this is a new Camden Town, and I think this will sort of change how Camden Town changed, you know. And it's that change that I don't want. But women are coming into this spaces now. We've got MPs.
So, Raju, you talk about the change that you don't want, and you also talk about the magic of Brick Lane for you, and that's different perhaps than the next generation. I mean, Saif, I'm going to ask you, what is the magic of Brick Lane for you as well in a moment, and maybe to comment on what you've heard Raju say. But so what is the magic of Brick Lane for you, Raju?
Well, obviously the obvious one is that I was born in Brick Lane. Yeah. You know, I usually say that I was born in Brick Lane, unfortunately, and I'm still living in Brick Lane tragically, you know. Everybody's moved out, you know, and even today and yesterday I was getting so many messages, you know, we all should meet up. But nobody lives in London, you know, everybody lives outside now, or East, in Manor Park, or, you know, these kind of places. You know, it's one of those things, you know, the magic is that this is where we all grew up, you know. Everything happened in Brick Lane for us as youngsters, you know. The football, you know, we had the football teams, we had the shops, you know. I mean, it's such a pathetic thing for me to say, you know, but I remember, I mean, I was working in restaurants when I was 12 years old, you know, and I remember buying a jumper in Brick Lane, you know, so this would be 1976. And I was so proud that I managed to buy a jumper with my own money. You know, I was working all weekend and I was getting £5, you know. And to me, I mean, it sounds so pathetic, but these things come into my mind now, you know, and I was so proud. I wouldn't be seen dead in a jumper like that now, but you know, but I mean, you know, I can't explain it, but these are the things that mean so much to me, you know, that the shops, you know, the things about the you know, the electrical shops that was there, the television. I never had a television. Well, I still don't have a television, but I never had a television growing up, you know. And it was all my ambition in life was to own a television, you know. And I used to stand outside the pubs in Brick Lane and just watch the football, or go to Bethel Green and watch the football on the television shops, you know. And so all that magic, you know, the magic is that, like you said, is that it was our space. It's a space that belonged.
Yeah.
Space of belonging. And, you know, I remember in 76, whole lot of us from Brick Lane, all the young kids, all of us, we went to Southall. And we were shocked because we thought Brick Lane was the only place in the world where there were Asian people. I mean, it's so pathetic, you know. I can't explain it, you know.
No, I completely get it, Raju. So
we thought we were the only people in the world where there were Asians. I don't know what I thought was India or Bangladesh was like, you know. But we went to Southall and we was in total shock, all of us. One of them still lives in Brick Lane, you know. And sometimes we talk about this, going to Southall, and we were thinking, how the hell is this going on? You know, where these people come from, you know? And same, I think in the mid-90s, a group of us went to Manchester for the weekend. You know, we went to, is it Withenshaw or something, a street full of Asian restaurants, and we were shocked. We thought Brick Lane was the only place in the world where there was Asian restaurants, South Asian restaurants, and here we were in, you know, full of, you know, more restaurants in there than there was in Brick Lane. So, you know, so we were, you know, a bit shocked by that. But I mean, it was our space, and at the end of the day, it's also a place where I was born, you know, and you know.
So for you, it's the place that you took your first steps. It's the place that actually your entire world was crafted. Your entire world is Brick Lane. And
my earliest memory is Brick Lane is the markets, you know.
Wow.
I think I'm probably talking about when I was 2 or 3 years old.
Wow.
You know, going outside the front door, the market. I mean, 131 Brick Lane is actually where the market is. You know, opening the door and just running into the market, and the market was different. One of the photos I've got, you can see how busy the market was. So when you turn right and right again in Sclater Street, it used to be the dog market. It used to be called the dog market. So all the animals were being sold there. So as a little kid, I'm sure all my memory is just looking at the animals, looking at the rabbits and looking at the turtles, you know. That's my earliest memory of life, you know.
So let me bring Saif in, and in a moment, Jasveer is going to put up a few pictures of you, a few photographs of yours. So we're gonna get a chance to see it. There were some comments actually around, you know, there's so many people that want to see your photographs, and lots of people are saying that actually how brilliant it is that women spaces do exist, and they are changing and evolving, and actually we're creating them, which is great. Saif, let me bring you in. Magic of Brick Lane, what is that for you?
I mean, Brick Lane's one of the most inspiring places in the country, and I think we need to kind of get our heads around this. You know, it's because people come together here. I mean, it's historically everybody knows about the migrations and the Huguenots, to the French, to the Jews, to the different groups who have come over, but it's also given people access to a city which is otherwise probably quite inaccessible, you know. And Brick Lane was that very edge. And when the Bangladeshis moved in, or South Asians moved in, they really felt that. And back then, obviously, we didn't have the disparity of wealth that we're seeing now, you know. In Brick Lane with the Truman Brewery doing, you know, huge retail spaces and shopping malls and things like that, where, you know, you won't see very many local shops. It, you know, tells us that our times have changed, and we've got international brands coming over. We've got medium to large scale businesses trying to steal the Brick Lane brand in a way. You know, maybe steal is a bit of a harsh word, but they're trying to attach themselves to the Brick Lane brand because there's cultural capital there. They can go around the world and say, we've got a place on Brick Lane, you know, and off Brick Lane. But as a result of that, we've seen the pushing out of smaller businesses, including ethnic minority business, and definitely Bangladeshi business as a result of that. You know, off the top of Brick Lane is Red Church Street, where a small, you know, Bangladeshi-run restaurant called Chart closed down literally overnight because Louis Vuitton had moved in over the road, and the rents had gone up £2,000 a week. And that was really hard for them, and as a result their rents went up. So there's an impact there which we have to look at, because culture isn't necessarily encountered through things we buy, but also the places we walk through and feel inspired by. And I feel inspired by, I mean, I did my final year dissertation on that because I felt so inspired by, because I kept writing about the area, you know. I don't know how to describe that to people sometimes, but when you do sit down and start to describe it, you realize it's because people come together, and they come together in ways which sometimes are very difficult to put into words, but they're really, really crucial to how we are as human beings and are innate to how we collectively express ourselves. So that's in a nutshell, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, absolutely. So the magic keeps drawing you back. You've written about it. You're fighting for it. You want to keep the essence of our community, our heritage, our identity, but actually keep inspiring the younger generation. Like you say, as you walk through Brick Lane, you get that vibe. As soon as I've turned the corner and I see the Bengali sign and the lampposts in the green henna patterns, and I'm just like, I'm home. I'm home. And it feels, and the other bit about being at home in Brick Lane is it's British Bengali. So all of us will be able to identify, and many people speak. And when you're in Bangladesh, you're a foreigner. When you're in the UK, you're a foreigner. And Brick Lane is one of those very small, tiny places in the world that you go, actually, everything's here. I'm British Bengali here. And I wanted to ask you to talk a little bit about this sort of people, the cultural capital. And I look, from my perspective, that's appropriation. So suddenly Bengali is cool. Suddenly, you know, Maspiran is cool. Alu Borta is cool. So you've got people, organizations, and big brands coming in, and you know, I think I saw Next was selling Punjabis the other day, and I was a bit like, what? Like, what? Why is Next selling Punjabis? And of course, and then you look at it, and of course, it's probably made in Bangladesh or India anyway, isn't it? But it's the appropriation and the fact that it's going to be more easier for, you know, us to go to Next and buy a Punjabi for our kids than to go off to Bangla, you know, go off to wherever we're going to go off to. And actually, that appropriation piece makes me really angry. And I think one of the things that I'd want to see in policy change is, if you are, what is your contribution back to society? So if Louis Vuitton, Next, and whoever is appropriating alu bortha and dal and Punjabis and salwar kameezes, like, what are you contributing back to the source of where you nicked or stole that culture from? Did you use a Bengali designer? Are you actually acknowledging them? The profits that you are making, are you contributing and putting that back to conserve, like, the heritage that Raju talks about? Like, what decision, or is it just lining the pockets of people that own big businesses? And if that's the case, we're not going to get planetary health or equality anytime soon, are we? So that's my perspective on appropriation, but I'd really like to understand your perspective on this cultural capital you talk about.
I mean, after war, I think this country makes its the largest kind of earner is actually the media, creative industries, and all of the ones that we love, you know, everything that we love, and cultures is that, you know, it's the second biggest earner in this country. So it's huge. You know, people come to England to feel inspired. People come to London to feel inspired. It's a global city. It's the world, you know, the world thinks about it. And I mean, it's something that's difficult to define, and as a result, it's been commodified through the years. And what you find is, and certainly in the northern end of Brick Lane, for example, where the hipsterification has definitely played itself out much more strongly and more expressively, to the benefit of the landowners there, because they can say, hey, this is the hippest place in the country, you can come along and hang out here. But what happens is, sometimes that shows the local culture as in a different light. And I think we need to be aware of how the lens can shift. And actually everybody has creative capital, you know, everybody, it's not just about, you know, people painting, it's actually the fact that you're expressing something collectively or by yourself. And I think we all have that. And with that, and especially now with the internet age, you know, you've got people constantly uploading things online about how they're expressing some things, whether it's culture, encounter, jokes about Brick Lane, about being Asian, and just that in itself shows us that the South Asian culture is extremely rich in that reservoir of creativity. So that plays itself out across Brick Lane as well. You know, you're seeing the hipster culture is definitely picking up on those South Asian elements. For me, just from what you said, I mean, just on a slightly serious note, is I was doing a project on Brick Lane about 5-6 years ago, and that was when the Rana Plaza disaster happened in Dhaka, and that really sent, you know, shivers down all of us, because we were working on this project which was looking at muslin, which is a very high-end textile, both in Bangladesh and in India, and very difficult to work with, and it really made us become, the whole group of us who were working on this project at the time, made us become very introspective about how, you know, we've reduced the makers of South Asia to t-shirts, you know, making t-shirts, and their lives to that price as well. And yet we come from a heritage which is so extremely rich and has had these huge heights in high-end clothing and all of that. And to this day, muslin comes back into the work that I do, you know, and each time it's getting bigger and bigger. We did the Muslin Festival in Dhaka in 2016, and here we've got another exhibition coming up at the House of Annetta in Princelet Street, hopefully looking at Jamdani. Why are these important? Because actually they connect us to a past which is South Asian, which is undivided Bengal or united India or whatever you want to call it, you know, but it's something which is a shared, something really to be, you know, shout off the rooftops about. So we've got cultural capital, you know.
I thank you for summing that up, and thank you for bringing in Jamdani, because that's a great segue for me to actually talk about my love of saris. So, as a British Bengali woman, I mean, I'm sitting in my sari room, which, you know, I'm chuffed to bits about my collection. But every sari, Saif, has got a story, because some of these saris date back to, like, they belong to my dadi, and some of them, most of them are my mum's. And actually, as a Bengali woman, you know, your mum and your auntie start to collect saris for your wedding pretty much as soon as you hit teenagers. So there's a huge sort of thing around the stories of the saris that we own. But as I grew up and I realized that actually the artisans of Bangladesh were being squeezed more and more and more. The industrialization and the commercialization of saris meant that the tant, the jamdani were like, you know, like the people that were making them, as hard as they are to make, were actually not being remunerated. So these days I'll only wear handloom saris that are either directly from artisans in Bangladesh or India, jamdanis, cotton. And what's quite interesting is then, when I wear the tant cotton and, you know, they haven't been starched or they have been starched, whatever it is, my mom, my aunties, my cousins are a bit like, well, they're not modern enough. They're not being made by the, you know, sort of the Bollywood film style. And actually, for me, that's the whole point. The point is that every sari and every weave has got a family story or a district or a story from Bangladesh. And I'm still learning about all the different weaves and what they mean. But also, when I'm presented at the Bank of England in my job, for example, and I turn up in a sari, actually, I'm probably one of only women in the Bank of England that have ever presented in a sari or been in a room of the governor of the bank talking about the mental health element of the financial sector. And that fills me with pride. But as a 40-something-year-old woman, I feel confident to do that. In my 20s, I wouldn't have done that. I would have spent more time assimilating and sticking on the best next suit that I could afford to be in the room so that I wasn't different. But I have a responsibility, I feel now, in this last part of my career, to to shamelessly celebrate being a Bengali woman in the finance sector, talking about mental health in a way that then sets a precedence and creates a bit of change for the next generation of our people, South Asian people. So I'm with you. Whatever muslin and jamdani, like, I'm there. Like, tell me what you want me to do, and I'll be there to support that, because it's one of the things that I'm deeply passionate about. From so many different perspectives, you know, and I won't even go into the empire and how they actually cut off the thumbs and fingers of, you know, people that made the muslin and the jamdani so that it couldn't be recreated, which is again an even bigger reason to wear jamdanis, to actually go, you know, the original is gone, but we're gonna this is us now. Raju, we're going to show some of your pictures now. We've only got about 10 minutes left of this, but as Jasveer put some of your images up, maybe we'll do three or four, and maybe you could talk us through how old you were, what those pictures mean to you, if that's okay.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what pictures you're going to show.
We're a surprise, you see. We didn't plan for this. This is to catch you out.
Okay, right. Yeah.
Jasveer, over to you.
Can you hear us?
Here we go. Right, so that first image, go on, Raju.
Well, you're not showing the whole image, but you're only showing half the image. I took that in, obviously, Brick Lane in the Sunday market. So that is 85. I mean, you know, I'm learning about photography. I mean, you know, I'm learning myself. So I'm trying to get the person in the mirror and all the old whatever it is, a cooker and the typewriter. I mean, you know, in those days, you know, if I was lucky, I could afford to get film roll, you know, and you can't see what you've taken, whether it's you know, it's in focus or not. So luckily this is in focus. I mean, so many photos are not in focus, you know, so, but this is, I mean, I've taken so many photos that I've tried to recreate the same thing now, you know. So yeah, I mean, that's you know, I mean, I like to say something, if I can, about you know, when all in the 80s, when the Bangladesh community, the Indian community, where they're all going into council houses, you know, the people who were living there before, they left all their furnitures behind, you know, and so all these furnitures used to be thrown out, and people used to come from Portobello Road and in vans and pick up all these old furniture, you know. And some of the furniture I had, I mean, I was a kid, you know, I was a homeless kid when I was you know, given this flat, you know, and I was given furniture, you know, I was given a bed, I was given, you know, and I wish I had them now, because they were so you know, so solid, and you know, but I was like, you know, one day I'm gonna earn money and buy my own bed, buy new bed, you know, and it's you know, one of those strange things, you know, that we throw out solid stuff, and you know, but that's it.
Yeah, I think so. I love this photo of yours. Go on, next one. Thanks, Jasveer.
Yeah, I mean, I think this one I must have taken it. So this is again Brick Lane. It's next to Taj Stores now, but it's a pizza place now. And then now I think it's a food place run by Bengalis, but it's not Indian Asian food. It's Italian pizza place now. But I mean, I'm just saying that, you know, you can see it's a food place and a video shop, you know, together, you know, and both of them at the same time, you know. You know, it's just so weird that both at the same time. And the amusement arcade next door, you know, I've got some pictures in color of that, you know. Very rarely I took color pictures, you know, but I think I had some out of date color print, and so. Oh, can you go up? Oh yeah, there's the can you go up? There was a photo there. If you go up, no, down. I mean down. Down, keep going down. Yeah, this one. Yeah. So this I took in '86. You know, so the very first ever Channel 4 Bengali film was made in Brick Lane. You know, Ruhul Amin. So I said to Ruhul Amin 3 years beforehand, if you're going to make a film in Brick Lane, you have to employ me. You know, they were quite good. They employed a few of us. You know, so I worked as an assistant. You know, in that film. So I mean, it's only now that I've seen these photos, you know, but so it was during that filming in the summer of '86 that I must have been walking down Fashion Street when I took this photo. He must have been sitting there. I took a quick snap, you know. But years later, when I had the exhibition in 2016, this daughter came and she was so happy. She said she hasn't got any photos of her dad, you know, except for passport photos.
Wow.
You know? And she was so glad that, you know, and I said to her, I said, you know, I mean, obviously I hand printed all the photos for the exhibition. And I said, I'll have some spare ones. I'll give you a spare copy. She said she didn't want a copy of the photo. She said, can you send it by phone to me? And I said, I'm giving you a free, you know, expensive print, you know. But she said, no, I don't. What am I going to do with a photo? You know, can you send it to me on a mobile phone? So I can send it to her on a mobile phone.
Brilliant. Raju, that's a great story to say, look, we're coming to an end. Just thank you very much for showing us some of those pictures. Please, to everybody, go and have a look. And we've got loads of comments on the chat. So what we will do is we'll have a look at some of them, and as far as we can, we will actually respond to them maybe directly outside of this group as well, and have a little reflection on things. But hang on, brilliant, I didn't realize you could do that. So actually let's spend the last couple of minutes on this question. And Saif, would you like to have a think about this? How did you generate awareness of the impact of these changes, and what things do you feel are important in galvanizing resistance? So I guess what is it that we think that we need to do to make sure that we are prepared and promoting inclusion and our voices here is, I think, where this sits, and it's a good question to end on.
I've been an activist only by accident, really, because what we're doing is we're saving all these spaces because they're so important to us, and we've got to give it some time, because as much as we might sort of do an online petition or whatever it might be, making an objection to something has diversified as well. You have to do it on multiple formats. You have to do campaign videos, as we're finding with the Save Brick Lane campaign. We have to do soft campaigning to hard campaigning, to lobbying with politicians. We had the mayor of Hamlets and MPs like Rushnar Ali come down, but we had to pressurize them. You know, it takes a lot of time and effort to do that because you feel passionate about something. So I think essentially it comes down to how we connect and how we have those quite sometimes hard conversations about what it is we value. It's not about necessarily other people telling us what we value. We should be asking ourselves, what it is that I love about my high street? What is it that I do? For example, you know, you might like a particular shop, but what is it about that? Is it, or you might like a local market or a street, or you sit here for 5 minutes, but there's something really special about that and it enhances your life. We have to kind of look at that in a very sensitive way, because at the moment it feels like everything's kind of under threat because somebody else from somewhere else has written behind closed doors that they want a piece of that. But you have that social value. Yeah, everybody has that social value. So I think to bring that back is really, really crucial. And to do that, you need to come together around a more open round table, really, with the communities that are affected by these changes.
Thanks, Saif. So your call to action to all of us is connect with ourselves, work out what it is it means to be British Bengali, what is it that we're connecting with, and what is it that Brick Lane means to us and other parts of, you know, Manchester, Bristol, where else are we, and what does that mean? And then actually, how are we organizing? How are we connecting with each other? Social media plays a huge part in being able to organize, galvanize, do stuff like this. South Asian Heritage Month is such an honor to be part of, because it's bringing these conversations, and we need to lean in and do more of that. Raju, any more final words from you?
No, I mean, all I'm saying is, all I can say is that, you know, I'm waiting to see. I mean, you know, like I said, I'm against the shopping mall. Yeah, I mean, things will change. You know, there will be buildings, you know, more buildings in Brick Lane, more buildings all over London. But I'm just hoping that, you know, something that is totally out of place and out of order, you know, just doesn't, you know, connect with that street, you know, shouldn't be there, you know. So all the factories have been changed into, you know, I worked in these factories as a kid, you know, I remember, you know, seeing all the changes, you know, for good and for bad, maybe, you know, but, you know, let's just wait and see, you know, yeah.
So
I'll still be here. I'll still be here. You know.
You'll still be here, and you please continue documenting as you have done, because I think you know, what you've created is something that actually can't be created through any other lens. And thank you very much for the work that you both do in this space for all of us that identify as British Bengali, and our kids, and also the community that we live in, the majority community that live in, because without the beauty and nuances of our culture and our differences and our celebrations, actually, what is everything else bland? And who wants bland? We want diversity, we want color, we want difference, we want nuance, we want change, and we want our voices to be equally heard. So on that note, I'm going to thank both of you, Raju and Saif. Thank you very much for being with us for the last hour, sharing so much of your thoughts and your insights. And thanks very much to South Asian Heritage Month for including us on the first day of the launch. What a great conversation to be having. And I think sort of 3 messages from me really to conclude. I think on a policy level, thought need to be given, and we need to advocate and say what that is, so that actually everything isn't wiped out. We recognize that progress and change is always going to be here. Raju said that, you know, 5 times in his lifetime he's seen change. So it's not necessarily the change, but it's don't take away the heart of our culture in creating that change by actually commoditizing our culture and selling culture, because culture sells. And the last thing is, for me, I will always feel like Brick Lane is a place that resonates as home, and I don't want my aloo porta and my hukti satni to go anywhere. So we're going to keep fighting to keep that in. Thank you very much, and have a lovely evening.
Thank you very much, Poppy.
Yeah, thanks.
Save Brick Lane.
Yeah, save Brick Lane. Take care, you both. Bye-bye.
Bye.